and satisfy the hunger of all living beings. Beloved Father, you heal all hearts of sorrow, so that they in turn may show forgiveness to those whose minds are shrouded in ignorance of the self. Beloved Mother, who imparts to all the sense of choice, so we may finally come to choose you, who are truth, and thus find everlasting freedom. Glory to your name, O truth. For yours is the kingdom of existence, of peace and love. All power and glory emanates from you alone, who imparts to all the wisdom, light, love, and courage to refer to themselves as I am. Amen. Om. Beloved, all that you perceive is transcendent.
Namaste, beloveds. My apologies for the technical hitch there with the delays. My computer completely froze up. Welcome to the Advaita Channel. I'm Bhagavati, and today I'm going to continue reading from Adyashanti, Resurrecting Jesus. I just had the inspiration to pick up this book to share during the Christmas period. And it's rolled out into a full book reading. I was only going to do a few sections from it, dipping into it, but somehow here I am on chapter 4, a map of awakening. So namaste all of you. Thank you for joining me. I love you all so much. A map of awakening. Adyashanti opens this chapter with a quote from St. John of the Cross, one of the great Christian mystics. If a man wishes to be sure of the road he treads on, he must close his eyes and walk in the dark. The Jesus story reads like a roadmap for spiritual awakening. Very happy to have you here all. Sohamdina Nitya. I can't help but fall in love with you all. My beloved Namai out there watching also. Let us get back to our roadmap. The Jesus story reads like a roadmap for spiritual awakening. The journey of awakening to the divine being that you and I can realize internally. Jesus lived out in his life story through his humanity. This is one of the amazing things about the Jesus story. If you've gone through the stages and steps of awakening, you cannot help but see these stages embodied in the Jesus story. The Jesus story doesn't directly address spiritual awakening because it's speaking in mythic language, the language of metaphor. In order to understand the story being told in the Gospels, you literally need to absorb it, to become it. You can't remain a spectator and expect to understand it. Because then you're on the outside, still stuck in the logical, inner, linear mind. The truths being conveyed through the Jesus story are beyond logic, beyond the conditioned thinking mind. They're of a higher order of wisdom that you can only really understand by awakening. The calling. We must have all had the calling to be gathering here tonight, to be gathering here on the Advaita Channel, gathering as a Sangha of being. We've all had this calling. This is what draws us together. The first stage of the awakening journey is the calling. The calling arrives when we first feel that spiritual impulse that galvanizes our attention. All of a sudden, we sense a greater mystery to life that we seek to experience more deeply. It quite literally calls us. So perhaps we might have thought that it was our calling, but we're the ones being called. And it's our one heart calling us together. I feel no separation with all of you. Not a hair's breadth. All of a sudden we sense a greater mystery to life that we seek to experience more deeply. It literally calls us. Through my teaching, I have heard many people's stories of their calling. Sometimes it happens in childhood, as a result of a spiritual opening experience that reorients their life. They may forget about that story for years or even decades, only to remember it in later life and then connect the dots, seeing that the opening they experienced as a child changed the course of their life. This calling can arrive at any point in your life. It is that moment when the trajectory of your life begins to turn towards the mystery of life. When I say the mystery of life, what I'm referring to is that transcendent aspect of life that shines through the world of space and time. Now, if we're completely caught up in our dualistic mind and not paying close attention, then we don't even notice that this spiritual core of existence is shining through into the world of time. Can you imagine how we can overlook this? When we come to see this divine light, we can only wonder how we ever missed it. How could we ever miss it? But most people don't begin to experience this, or even know it's there, until something in their life opens them enough that they begin to experience the sublime. It may be a great moment, it may be small, but when that moment of significance reveals to you that there's more to life than you imagined, that is the beginning of the calling. From that moment on, your life is now on a different trajectory than it was before. This calling, I'm looking back, I'm wondering where this calling arose for this one. It could only have arisen out of suffering. Suffering. How I feel now is I feel like I couldn't suffer if I tried. Maybe for a minute or two. But there is a lot of suffering here. And for many, this is the path that brings us the calling. Maybe we lose a loved one. Maybe we become very sick. Maybe we lose everything, our home or our money, our friends, our status. You know, I've experienced all of those things, and I don't believe for a minute that there's anyone in this Sangha or anyone who may be watching this video who's possibly witnessed anything different in their life. Because these are the things that bring us to this calling. So when I see others suffering, I just remember Mujiji saying, oh, so lucky, they're so lucky. Because I know it brings them here. It's their calling. It's the opening. It's how the light gets into us. This is what turns us to look deeper. Suffering. Beautiful, beautiful suffering, such a gift. You can't tell it any other way. Not now, not anymore. Such a gift. This reading that I'm giving, there's been a very strong reminder for me, perhaps of where this calling particularly deepened for me, which was maybe 15 years ago. Spiritual upbringing. I'd been a Buddhist for over 30 years before coming to Advaita, to Guruji. But there was a time when I was struck down like a bird in flight. And I became so sick. I went from incredibly successful in my career. I could have had everything I wanted at that point, but it all just fell out of the sky, just like that, one day. No warning, no planning, no expectation. And when it happened, and I was having panic attacks because I couldn't breathe for the fear and the shock of what was happening. All around sickness of the body that brought the whole thing crashing down. The only thing that would work, that would get me through, was this calling, this looking deeper. I remember someone telling me I would look back and realize this time was a great opening for me and a great gift. And perhaps it's only sitting here today that I can actually look back and say that. And the reminder came today in the message from someone. Someone who I know is probably watching tonight or will be watching the recording. Who wrote to say how grateful she was for this channel that we all share together. This offering of our light as Father has asked us to. And if any one of you ever doubts that there aren't people out there listening and benefiting from this, know it not to be true. Because this message from someone was someone who's very sick, who's unable to read a book, who owns the very book that I'm reading. She's not short of the money. This person can read the book, in theory, but in practice it's not possible. She's too sick. And this happened to me 15 years ago. I couldn't even focus my eyes to track on a page. I couldn't hold a book without shaking. I was housebound and bedbound for some years. And my partner, my beloved Nemai, she would read to me. She would read to me Zen texts, Buddhist texts, sutras, meditations, because it was the only way I could hear these teachings. It was the only way I could receive these pointings, because ultimately it was the Buddha's pointings that brought me to Guruji. And Guruji who brings me to the self. And so I just wanted to share that I was so touched and so grateful that there's someone out there today listening to this who actually has the exact same health condition as I had. And who is able to hear Adyashanti's teachings on Jesus and on awakening. Because our father Ananta founded this channel and asked us to read on it. And we said yes, and we stepped up, despite our fears, despite discomfort with cameras or equipment, despite the technical problems. We stepped up. And it just makes me so happy. And I've wandered off the text, and I'll come back now. If any of you are wondering whether you should read, please come and read. Please just pick up one of those books and come and join us and read. You're all welcome. You're all so welcome here. Adyashanti on his calling. I can remember when this happened to me. Now, I had spiritual interests my whole life. But I don't really feel this calling. Where the orientation of life shifts quite suddenly. Until I was about 20 years old. As I described earlier, I'd picked up a book on Zen Buddhism and come upon the word enlightenment. At the time, I didn't know what enlightenment was. I'd hardly even heard of it. And I certainly never thought that I was going to seek enlightenment. But when I read that word on the page, enlightenment, it was like a little nuclear explosion inside of me. It evoked something in me so powerful that I knew that the trajectory of my life, at the instant that I read that word, was forever changed. It wasn't something that I sought. It was not something that I wanted or even tried to make happen. It simply happened. And the trajectory of my life was never the same from that point on. I remember getting up the next morning feeling scared and excited. I had a conversation with my mother. in which I told her, you know, the trajectory of my life has completely shifted overnight. I described what had happened. She gave me the sense that she had some understanding of what I was talking about, and she was very supportive. As with any good adventure, I felt excited that a new vista of my life had opened up, full of possibility and mystery. But also I had a little bit of fear, because I realized that I had no control over what had happened. I didn't make the calling happen. I couldn't pretend it didn't happen. And I couldn't have turned it off even if I'd wanted to. It was disconcerting. And sure enough, my intuition was true. The entire trajectory of my life had changed at that instant. That's the calling. Mine was pretty obvious, while for others, it's more subtle. It occurs within each person in a unique way. So it doesn't necessarily have to be felt as a big event. No, I wish I'd known, or maybe I could have saved some suffering. Had a small, tiny event. Oh, right. It can just be that moment when you open to the transcendent quality of life. For some, maybe it is just that. Maybe it's just the perfume of a flower on the breeze. Maybe it's the way the moon looks in the sky one night. Maybe it's just the way an animal looks at you in the eye. A tiny thing. But if it's God looking at you through those eyes, it's the scent of God wafting on the breeze. It's not tiny at all. So when Guruji says it's sizeless, it has no smell, no taste, no weight, so it could be just some moment when you open to the transcendent quality of life. Then you often find yourself drawn to some sort of spiritual path. In my case, I found a Zen teacher and spent the next 14 years with her, meditating and studying. In my own case, I went from being a book Buddhist, there must be many book Buddhists out there, book Christian, Muslims, book Hindus, all of this. To realizing I needed to learn to meditate, and I needed to learn to meditate well and properly and correctly and quick. It definitely needed to be quick, because there was a risk to my life. And suddenly, when we feel there's not much time to play with, we can move, we can shift a gear, and our priorities change. And I went and found a local Buddhist center and went and found out how to train as a meditator. And I learned how to pray again, and I learned how to be in touch with that divinity that life seems to, for a while, help us lose touch from. And yet in a moment, an event that has occurred in my life, or one of these small transcendent moments that Adyashanti shares with us, can bring it all back. Because it never goes away, it's always there. Maybe we're just looking the other way. Maybe we don't want to see it sometimes. Maybe it frightens us. Maybe it awes us. Maybe we just can't believe it can be that close. So for me, training as a Buddhist, training in meditation, chanting mantras as we were discussing earlier. So much time in practice, 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 sitting, 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 meditating, chanting, reading sadhanas, until I was too sick to even do those things, and they were read to me. I was given a particularly powerful mantra, supposedly a powerful mantra, which I was only discussing earlier with Sohami. This would save me, this would help me. Still, it didn't seem to work. Actually, 15 years on, that mantra still chants. It chants on its own at my heart. It takes no effort anymore. It's just there. And how do we get to where we are? How did we get here together? We got here together because of this calling. We've each had this calling. Some of us, maybe it's calling and we're not listening. There are people who haven't joined us yet who it's definitely calling, but they're not listening yet. But they're on their way. One heart. The awakening. The next phase of one's spiritual life is the awakening. And the word awakening is quite accurate. When you have a dream in the middle of the night, at the moment you wake from your dream, you suddenly realize, oh, it was a dream. Yet the moment before you woke up, the dream was entirely real to you. It was as real as this moment. You wake up from the reality of the dream space to the reality of your everyday life, your waking mindset. In the same way, spiritual awakening occurs when you awaken from what you think of as your normal state of consciousness. Awake, eyes open, moving about in the world, to your deep, essential, true nature. It literally feels like waking from a dream. It's as if you wake up from the dream of thinking that you're already awake in your ordinary waking state. When you are spiritually awakened, what you thought was an awake state now seems like a dream. There's a shift from one order of reality to another. In a certain sense, the center of your regard shifts from yourself as a separate person to that which unifies us all. That's really what spiritual awakening is. A shift from seeing yourself as a limited, isolated, separate person to realizing you are essentially that which all beings partake of, that which all beings essentially and truly are. After awakening, that deeper sense of reality is available to you, and your sense of who you are, your identity, has undergone a transformation. The esoteric, inner spiritual disciplines of all traditions are means of bringing about this awakening, or of opening one to awakening. This is what occurs at the very beginning of the Gospel of Mark, when John the Baptist baptizes Jesus in the river of Jordan. Just as Jesus was coming up out of the water, he saw heaven being torn open and the Spirit descending on him like a dove. This is from the Gospel of Mark, chapter 1, verse 10. For a Bible buff, it's from the New International Version, Guruji's favourite Bible. I carry this because he tells us Bible stories. He reads the Bible to us at Sahaja. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever witnessed. When you awaken, when spirit descends, the veil of your dream state is torn apart, and all of a sudden, you're awakened to a new reality. The words used to describe the Spirit descending into Jesus after his baptism correspond very closely with one of my own experiences. Often, this awakening is a transcendent experience. You awaken up and out of your identity with body and mind. In my case, I had that experience too. A very powerful experience of moving up and out. Spirit or consciousness literally moved up and out of the body and mind. And for a period of time, there was absolutely no experience of anything. The body was gone. The mind was gone. I had no perception of the world or of my surroundings. I had moved into a total void. From that state of voidness, after a while, a download of insight began. Literally hundreds of insights per second downloaded into my system. Just as you download a program on your computer, Spirit or Divine Being was downloading insights into me. Many more than I could actually keep up with. This descent of spirit was just as depicted in the Jesus story. As I said, I'm reading the Jesus story as a metaphor for spiritual awakening. If you have experienced the descent of the Spirit, you know exactly what this passage in Mark is talking about. You don't need anyone to confirm it. You know. You know that the story tells of the descent of the Spirit in as clear a way as it can be told. That the metaphor mirrors the actual experience. There are many degrees of awakening, but all awakening has as its common denominator a shift from seeing ourselves as a separated, isolated human being to seeing ourselves as that which we all share. You can call it consciousness, divine being, spirit, God. Many words can be used, but it's the experience that matters. Trials and tribulations. At some point after awakening, sometimes very soon, sometimes not for quite a while, you reach a stage that I call trials and tribulations. In the Jesus story, this is symbolized by Jesus' 40 days in the desert and his encounter with Satan in the desert immediately following his baptism. In Buddhism, this stage is mythically portrayed by the image of Buddha sitting under the Bodhi tree, assaulted by Maya, the force of illusion. Maya is an impersonal force of illusion, while Satan is a personification of what we think of as evil. But the source of evil is actually illusion. So these are really two different mythic representations of the same experience. Maya, the internal force of illusion, Satan, the external, but it's the same illusion. When it comes to human beings, things are usually not quite as simple as they're portrayed in the images of myth, because our experience is so nuanced and subtle that it's difficult to convey in a story. But at this stage, each of us will likely undergo a series of trials, lasting months or even years. Through these trials, our new state of consciousness is put to the test by situations that we encounter in life that will test the depth of our realization. It's almost as if life says, in order to deal with this situation properly, you're going to have to respond to it from the place of realization, from your deepest nature to which you've awakened. If you go back into your ego or into your conditioned mind to respond, it simply won't work, and turmoil will ensue. As we go through our trials and tribulations, outer circumstances seem to be exquisitely put together, specifically to test each part of our realization. These trials and tribulations will also occur from the inside. Your unconscious at some point will start to reveal itself. In the unawakened person, the unconscious never really comes fully into conscious awareness. But with awakening, our means of suppression and denial are either torn apart completely or wounded so severely that we can't repress as much. The unconscious elements of our mind come into conscious awareness. And that is another kind of trial. What's being asked of you is to meet all of that inner material from the standpoint of divine being, from the standpoint of divine being, the standpoint of eternity, to meet it, to understand it, to resolve it. That may sound quite easy, but when it's actually happening, it's a little more gritty and real than the description suggests. You could think of these inward and outward trials as a form of purification. You're purifying the vehicle, body and mind, the same body and mind that you woke up out of when you awakened. Now this vehicle has to undergo its own purification so spirit can fully embody your humanity. And this is where the story of Jesus again provides a powerful mirror. Because Jesus is someone who embodied in his humanity the divine impulse, divine being. So again, Adya's referring to these inner and outer trials, these sufferings that we experience if we take them in the personal sense, in the human sense. But in the divine sense, they're an act of purification. They're a washing out, they're an emptying out. I remember saying for some time this year, through some tribulations of my own, I felt like I was being jet washed out by God. And I say, bring it on. I don't want to be any less than pure of that. Let no trace of that misbelief remain. To let no trace of this born being, this habitual creature, this bundle of thoughts and mistaken beliefs and foolishness, to have all of that washed away. It seems like it can be done in a moment. We can wish to be relieved so quickly. Even though seeing can occur in a moment, somehow this cleaning out, sometimes it appears to take a little time, but it's just an appearance. As Jesus moves through his story from beginning to end, he encounters almost nothing but trials and tribulations. It's kind of an understatement in the case of Jesus. How does he meet each one of these challenges, from Satan in the desert all the way to the crucifixion? From what place inside does he act? You'll see that Jesus is uncompromising. He always acts from the truth of eternal being. This is an amazing teaching, and its message is, if you meet your trials and tribulations from your own deepest realization, they will be released from your system and purified from you, so that eternal being can be fully embodied through your humanity. If only we will always act from the truth of our eternal being. If we meet these challenges head on, we look them squarely in the eye. In that moment, we can be free of them. And the eternal being can fully be embodied through our humanity. Guruji has a phrase that I love so much. A phrase that he spoke to me the first time I spoke with him. Emptiness walking in the form of a human being. We could say divinity walking in the form of a human being. Not a human being. Your divinity walking in the form of a human being. I don't care who you are listening to this now, watching the screen, where you are, what you're doing. Not a single one of you can be anything but divinity walking in the form of a human being. I say thank you, Jesus Christ, for your demonstration of this. Thank you, Adya, for your demonstration of this. Thank you, Buddha, for your demonstration of this. Thank you, Ramana, Papaji, Guruji, Nantaji. How many more? I could list them all night. We all know their names. But your name's on the list too. This isn't an exclusive guest list. It's not an exclusive club. You don't have to be a certain way. You just have to be. You just have to let ourselves be. Let divinity take care of the rest. Let life take care of the rest. I'm going to stop here. I've overrun a little because of the late start. I'd like to just finish with the beloved prayer from Guruji, which I seem to always finish this series of readings with.
Beloved, all that you perceive is transient, is passing. But you are the unchanging one, timeless and perfect. Rid yourself of all delusions and come lay down here in the silence of being. For unlike time, you are not passing. You are the formless within all forms, the silence and stillness inside all movements of time and manifestation. Arise into the fullness of your real nature as the unchanging self, the goal and source of all being. Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya.
Om 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 Namo Bhagavate Shri Jesus Christ Ki Jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Shri Buddha Ki Jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Shri Ramanaya Ki Jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Shri Papaji Ki Jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Shri Mujiji Ki Jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Shri Anantaji Ki Jai. I love you, Sangha of my heart. Thank you for joining. Om Namo Bhagavate Shri Sangha of Being Ki Jai. Good night, beloveds. Happy New Year.